Hello, 3C. I am back. It's a new day for me, but you should still be watching on from where I finished off last night, which is at page 55, top of page 55, wherein Box is a little unhappy with the story that Squealer is putting out there about Snowball rewriting history. We talked about this in class, how dangerous that is when authorities rewrite history, and that is what Squealer's doing here. So, Squealer's going to try something new right now to convince Boxer that this is, in fact, reality, in fact, what really happened. Our leader, Comrade Napoleon, announced Squealer, speaking very slowly and firmly, has stated categorically, comrade, that Snowball was Jones's agent from the very beginning, yes, and from long before the rebellion was ever thought of. Ah, that is different, said Boxer. If Comrade Napoleon says it, it must be right. That is the true spirit, comrade, cried Squealer. But it was noticed he would cast a very ugly look at Boxer with his little twinkling eyes. He turned to go, then paused and added impressively, I warn every animal on this farm to keep his eyes very wide open, for we have reason to think that some of Snowball's secret agents are lurking among us at this very moment. By creating these narratives, Squealer is sowing distrust among the animals, making them feel like they can't trust each other. They're old friends. They feel like they can't trust anybody. They can't trust their memories. They can't trust anything that except for what Squealer and Napoleon are saying. So they're really undermining just basic connections between people, friends and family, and making them afraid, using fear to control people. It's common. 4 days later, in the late afternoon, Napoleon ordered all the animals to assemble in the yard. When they were all gathered together, Napoleon emerged from the farmhouse, wearing both his medals, for he had recently awarded himself Animal Hero First Class and Animal Hero Second Class, with his 9 huge dogs frisking round him and uttering growls that sent shivers down all the animals' spines. They all cowered silently in their places, seeming to know in advance that some terrible thing was about to... Oh, God. Was that a cough or a sneeze? It was sort of both. It's funny how at these times, even just a basic cough and a sneeze, you start to sort of think, is that just a normal cough and sneeze together, or is that a symptom of coming viral infection? We live in strange times, 3C. Okay, so they're all, of course, again, using fear, using psychological manipulation, using threats of physical violence. It's classic dystopian, authoritarian stuff. Okay, let's see what's going to happen. Napoleon stood sternly surveying his audience. Then he uttered a high-pitched whimper. Immediately the dogs bounded forward, seized 4 of the pigs by the ear, and dragged them, squealing with pain and terror, to Napoleon's feet. The pigs' ears were bleeding, the dogs had tasted blood, and for a few moments they appeared to go quite mad. Gross. To the amazement of everybody, 3 of them flung themselves upon Boxer. Boxer saw them coming and put out his great hoof, caught a dog in midair and pinned him to the ground. The dogs shrieked for mercy, and the other 2 fled with their tails between their legs. Boxer looked at Napoleon to know whether he should crush the dog to death or let it go. Napoleon appeared to change countenance, and sharply ordered Boxer to let the dog go, whereat Boxer lifted his hoof, and the dog slunk away, bruised and howling. Okay, so lots happening here. 3C. I think you can guess who those 4 pigs are. If you remember back when Napoleon started taking more obvious control, it was the 4 younger pigs that tried to stand up to him, and he used the dogs to shut them down, so it's going to be the same 4 pigs now. The moment with Boxer here is used to indicate that the masses, the people, remember Boxer represents the working classes in Russia, or indeed working classes more broadly, so the sort of the larger percentage of the population, their power and strength. If they wanted to stand up to their authoritarian government, they could, but there's still so much in the thrall of the leader. So if Boxer wanted to, he could, with all of his strength, crush the dogs, overthrow the pigs alone by himself if he wanted to, but he doesn't want to because he's been basically brainwashed into total subservience of Napoleon. But Napoleon seems to recognize here that Boxer has that power, but maybe Boxer himself doesn't know that he could, and the same was true in Russia, of course. They had the power to stand up to Stalin, but they didn't necessarily know it, and they didn't necessarily use that. Okay, let's keep reading. Presently, the tumult died down. The four pigs waited, trembling, with guilt written on every line of their countenances. Your countenance is your face. Napoleon now called upon them to confess their crimes. They were the same four pigs as had protested when Napoleon abolished the Sunday meetings. Without any further prompting, they confessed that they had been secretly in touch with Snowball ever since his expulsion, that they had collaborated with him in destroying the windmill, and that they had entered into an agreement with him to hand over Animal Farm to Mr. Frederick. They added that Snowball had privately admitted to them that he had been Jones' secret agent for 4 years past. When they had finished their confession, the dogs promptly tore their throats out, and in a terrible voice, Napoleon demanded whether any other animal had anything to confess. Okay, I'm just going to look at my notes about this. So, of course, what these four pigs are saying is not true. We know that Snowball was a genuine supporter of the revolution, was never a traitor, but Napoleon here is continuing to rewrite history, and using fear, he's forcing these pigs to basically confess to something that they didn't do. So animals that show even a little bit of disapproval of Napoleon are going to die, and this is what happened in Stalinist Russia. So, of course, I've told you already, Napoleon represents a man called, Snowball represents a man called Trotsky. Trotsky was exiled from Russia by Stalin. They had worked together for the revolution, and then Stalin ended up exiling Trotsky, But after his departure from Russia, Stalin made up all sorts of things about Trotsky and used him to scare the people. And then in the 1930s, after the revolution, when Stalin had complete control of Soviet Russia, he started using these things called purges, which were essentially show trials. Which sort of a show trial is a trial in court wherein they sort of pretend that they're following the rule of law, following the the idea that innocent until proven guilty, for example. They pretend that they're following those rules when in reality the decision has already been made. They're already considered guilty. So this is an example of a show trial. What's happened here to the four pigs, and they're being forced to admit to things that they never did to put an end to their torture. So that's what happened with the purges. So they would have people admit to things they never did in Russia, and then they would be killed, and then after they've confessed, they would be executed as enemies of the people, and then their memories would be used to keep everybody else in a state of fear. So you're not going to do, for example, what these four pigs did. You're not going to stand up against Napoleon in front of everybody or at all, because you're going to get tortured and die. That's what happened with Stalin as well. Like what the hens did, that little mini rebellion they did when they found out their eggs were going to get sold. You're not going to do that anymore because you're too afraid. Okay, so the four pigs have been killed in front of everybody, and now we'll see what happens to the poor hens. We're at the bottom of page 56 now. The three hens who had been the ringleaders in the attempted rebellion over the eggs now came forward and stated that Snowball had appeared to them in a dream and incited them to disobey Napoleon's orders. They too were slaughtered. The Nagoose came forward and confessed to having secreted 6 ears of corn during the last year's harvest and eaten them in the night. Then a sheep confessed to having urinated in the drinking pool, urged to do this, so she said, by Snowball, and 2 other sheep confessed to having murdered an old ram, an especially devoted follower of Napoleon, by chasing him round and round a bonfire when he was suffering from a cough. They were all slain on the spot. And so the tale of confessions and executions went on, until there was a pile of corpses lying before Napoleon's feet, and the air was heavy with the smell of blood, which had been unknown there since the expulsion of Jones. When it was all over, the remaining animals, except for the pigs and dogs, crept away in a body. They were shaken and miserable. They did not know what was more Shocking, the treachery of the animals who had leagued themselves with Snowball, or the cruel retribution they had just witnessed. In the old days there had often been scenes of bloodshed equally terrible, but it seemed to all of them that it was far worse now that it was happening among themselves. Since Jones had left the farm, until today no animal had killed another animal. Not even a rat had been killed. They had made their way onto the little knoll where the half-finished windmill stood, and with one accord they all lay down as though huddling together for warmth. Clover, Muriel, Benjamin, the cows, the sheep, and a whole flock of geese and hens, everyone indeed except the cat, who had suddenly disappeared just before Napoleon ordered the animals to assemble. For some time nobody spoke. Only Boxer remained on his feet. He fidgeted to and fro, swishing his long black tail against his sides, and occasionally uttering a little whinny of surprise. Okay, so they're essentially trying to recover from what they've just seen. It's incredibly traumatizing, of course, to witness these executions. And of course, this is yet another one of the 7 commandments that has been broken. Animals killing another animal. So, of course, the ideals of the revolution are being shattered now, and it's becoming more and more difficult for them to pretend to themselves that the pigs are on their side, that this is what the revolution was supposed to be, because the ideals of the revolution that was outlined by Old Major and the reality they're living in is very difficult to reconcile. But Boxer, he's having trouble, and it's going to be interesting to see how he deals with it, of course, because Boxer is so devoted to the revolution. He's so dedicated to those ideals, and what's happening now is so contrary to that. Let's see what he does next. Finally, he said, "I do not understand it. I would not have believed that such things could happen on our farm. It must be due to some fault in ourselves. The solution, as I see it, is to work harder. From now onwards, I shall get up a full hour earlier in the mornings." Okay, so the lesson that Boxer has taken from this is not that the pigs have gone astray, not that Napoleon is an authoritarian leader bent on as much power and control as he can get. Boxer's decided that this must be because he's not working hard enough. Boxer is truly a tragic character in this story. He's one of the most lovable of the animals, maybe the most lovable, and the way he justifies what Napoleon does and forces himself to work harder and harder is truly tragic. Top of page 58 now. "And he moved off at his lumbering trot and made for the quarry. Having got there, he collected 2 successive loads of stones and dragged them down to the windmill before retiring for the night. The animals huddled about Clover, not speaking. The knoll where they were lying gave them a wide prospect across the countryside. Most of Animal Farm was within their view, the long pasture stretching down to the main road, the hayfield, the spinney, the drinking pool, the ploughed fields where the young wheat was thick and green, and the red roofs of the farm buildings with the smoke curling from the chimneys. Remember, this is the very spot where they went to celebrate the victory of the revolution. So they're now, back at that same point, when they're, in their heart, in the deepest heart of hearts, they know that something's gone wrong, really, really wrong on Animal Farm. It was a clear spring evening. The grass and the bursting hedges were gilded by the level rays of the sun. Never had the farm, and with the kind of surprise they remembered that it was their own farm, every inch of it their own property, appeared to the animals so desirable a place. As Clover looked down the hillside, her eyes filled with tears. If she could have spoken her thoughts, it would have been to say that this was not what they aimed at when they set themselves years ago to work for the overthrow of the human race. These scenes of terror and slaughter were not what they had looked forward to on that night when Old Major first stirred them to rebellion. If she herself had had any picture of the future, it had been of a society of animals set free from a hunger in the whip, all equal, each working according to his capacity, the strong protecting the weak, as she had protected the lost brood of ducklings with her foreleg on the night of Old Major's speech. Indeed, she did not know why. They had come to a time when no one dared speak his mind, when fierce growling dogs roamed everywhere, and when you had to watch your comrades torn to pieces after confessing to shocking crimes. There was no thought of rebellion or disobedience in her mind. She knew that even as things were, they were far better off than they had been in the days of Jones, and that before all else it was needful to prevent the return of human beings. Whatever happened, she would remain faithful, work hard, carry out the orders that were given to her, and accept the leadership of Napoleon. But still, It was not for this that she and all the other animals had hoped and toiled. It was not for this that they had built the windmill and faced the pallets of Jones's gun. Such were her thoughts, though she lacked the words to express them. An important part of Orwell's message in Animal Farm is how important it is to be educated, to be literate, to have the words to express your feelings, and to be aware when history is being rewritten, when your memories are being questioned, when numbers, when facts are being changed before your very eyes by your leaders, by the government. It's so important to be able to have the words, to be able to express yourself and your feelings. And that's Clover. She knows that this is not what Old Major promised, that this isn't the way things should be, but how can you express those feelings if you don't even have the words for it? That's why education is so important. So when things like this happen, you're empowered to be able to communicate that to not only to yourself, but to the people around you. At last, feeling this to be in some way a substitute for the words she was unable to find, she began to sing Beasts of England. The other animals sitting round her took it up, and they sang it 3 turns over, very tunefully, but slowly and mournfully, in a way they had never sung it before. They had just finished singing it for the 3rd time when Squealer, attended by 2 dogs, approached them with the air of having something important to say. He announced that, by a special decree of Comrade Napoleon, Beasts of England had been abolished. From now onwards it would be forbidden to sing it. The animals were taken aback. "Why?" cried Muriel. Okay. Beasts of England, if you go back and you look at the lyrics, really summarizes in a clear way that's easy for the animals to remember. Back on page 7 and 8, really summarizes exactly the message of the rebellion, and things like cruel rips no more shall crack, a golden future time, tyrant man shall be overthrown, these rings shall vanish from our noses. It's giving a view of the future in which there is no violence towards animals, in which it's sort of you work hard but you're happy and you're free and there's equality. And by the animals sort of remembering those ideas by singing it, of course Napoleon's going to want to get rid of this song because it's reminding them of what they've lost. And so that's why Squealer's out here to tell them that they can't sing it anymore. It is no longer needed, comrade, said Squealer stiffly. Beast of England was the song of the rebellion, but the rebellion is now completed. The execution of the traitors this afternoon was the final act. The enemy, both external and internal, has been defeated. In Beast of England we expressed our longing for a better society in days to come, but that society has now been established. Clearly this song has no longer any purpose. Frightened though they were, some of the animals might possibly have protested, but at this moment the animals set up their usual bleating of 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, which went on for several minutes and put an end to the discussion. So Beasts of England was heard no more. In its place Minimus, the poet, had composed another song, which began, Animal farm, never through me shalt thou come to harm. And this was sung every Sunday morning after the hoisting of the flag. But somehow neither the words nor the tune ever seemed to the animals to come up to Beasts of England. Okay. Oh gosh, wow, I mean, it's getting really sad now. You see the use of music and poetry in propaganda. Of course, music and poetry, art, really can move us in ways that words sometimes can't. And so the Beast of England song used to really unite them, and now it's being forbidden because it's too powerful, right? And now instead of Animal Farm helping the animals and leading them to this equal life, that line, never through me shalt thou come to harm, the burden is now put on the animals not to rebel, not to go against the pigs. That's sort of the reading between the lines of that song written by Minimus the poet. The onus is put back on the animals not to do any harm to Animal Farm in its current state, controlled by the pigs, controlled by Napoleon. So they're in a real fix, the animals, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do next. So you should be listening to this lesson on, I guess, Thursday if you're following the schedule set out by the school. You should be having listened to this in your 4th hour, now moving on to whatever your class is in the 5th. It's, I guess, up to you how strictly you follow that, or if you do things in a more flexible way. As long as you're doing what your teachers set out for you to do, you can, I guess, do it in whatever order you like, as long as you're doing what you need to do. So we, of course, never have a lesson on Friday. Our next lesson will be on Monday morning, as per usual. So I'm going to put a new video up for that, for us to talk about the Russian Revolution. I think the time has come for me to make more explicit to you the connections between Animal Farm and the Russian Revolution. So the next lesson on Monday is going to be not reading from the book, but focusing more on reading the book. Now, you'll notice when you go to Moodle that there is a link. Now let me just open up the Moodle page, which I should have opened, but I don't. Okay, Engels, Christie. Now, if you go to Animal Farm, you will see a link. It's called Animal Farm Cartoon Movie 1954. Now, this is a link to a YouTube video version of the Animal Farm animated movie. Now, it's absolutely lovely and really beautifully done. Ironically, it was made by the CIA in America as sort of propaganda against Stalinist Russia, which is, of course, ironic because Animal Farm is very much against propaganda and against the government sort of taking control of things like art and music and film and stories. So there's an irony to the existence of this 1954 movie, but it is, of course, very worth watching. So it's something we would usually have watched in class. We're not having class. You can watch it now. Maybe I'll put it on there, schedule it as something for you to watch in one of your hours in the coming weeks. It's there for you to access, and it's worth seeing. But it is a little different to the book, so don't think you can just watch the movie, because there's definitely things you'll miss out on if you don't sit with me and read the book. Yeah, okay. 3C, I'll see you on Monday, and I'm thinking of you. Try and help your parents as much as you can. That's one thing I wanted to say to you as well before I go. This is a really stressful time. The adults in your life are probably feeling really under pressure. So do everything you can to look after them. Give them hugs. Try and cook. Try and at least clean up after yourselves, the bare minimum, but also try and do extra stuff around the house. Make sure you're not making life harder for your parents, particularly if they still have to go to work during this time. But even if they're at home too, look after them. Look after yourselves and be nice to each other. I'll see you on Monday. Bye.